When I found out that Tadayoshi Yamamura was coming back as character designer last October, I just started laughing. I couldn't believe after all the different designers we've had, they would bring him back. I remember thinking, if you're going to do a remake, why do it with the same designer? If I'm going to see the same thing again, show it to me in a fresh way. Shintani Nakatsuru, the man who drew this for all I care, give the role to someone else. Anyone else. Until I realized with the official announcement, oh, this project isn't actually a full remake like I thought. Forget Dragon Ball Super Beerus, this is now Dragon Ball Super Kai, like it was literally called that by the staff themselves. They are taking existing footage and retouching it. And then for the really rough episodes, because Toei management back in 2015 were like, hey, why give animators, directors, really anyone time? Let's adopt the mentality of a fast food chain and try and have them push out episodes as fast as possible. And if fans don't like that, we throw the animators under the bus, even the ones that have worked on our shows for 20 plus years, and no one will suspect a thing. And it actually kind of worked at the time. And so for the classic episode 5, a lot of shots are of course redrawn. For the third time, if we are counting the Blu-ray release. But unlike the Blu-ray, you also have cuts completely reanimated, and in some cases, entire scenes are remade in this new version. Storyboarding, direction, animation, everything. But even still, at the end of the day, for a lot of these episodes, you're still working with 2015 Super as a base. This is more of a huge remaster, if anything, not a full remake from the ground up. And so with that in mind, yes, reusing Tadayoshi Yamamura's designs from Super makes sense when you're retouching 2015 era Yamamura designs. It would be completely out of place to be switching from Shintani to Nakatsuru designs for like the rough stuff that needed reanimating. Then hey, we're back to Yamamura again for just a few minutes for the art that only required a couple of lighting adjustments. And I know that sounds like saying the sky is blue or green in Z's case, but I have seen a few reactions on the greatest hub of intelligence, aka Twitter, asking why are we back to the stiff Super Saiyan hair? Why was Yamamura brought back? He should retire. Now, if this was a full remake, sure, I'd 100% be there with you if Yamamura was brought back in that context. I would have a stroke, you'd find me in the Royal Brisbane Hospital. I already kinda half did, because like I said in the intro, that's what I assumed this project was when I heard about it last year. But again, that's not what this is. And you might say, well, they should do a full remake, reanimate the entire thing. Well, one, going back and adjusting light and effects to already made art, redrawing faces, and even redoing entire scenes here and there, while it's still a time-consuming task, it's nowhere near the same as completely remaking a show from the ground up, like Hunter x Hunter, Rurouni Kenshin, whatever. It's just a different beast. And two, a project like that would drag a lot more staff and resources away from the Galactic Patrolman arc, and I don't know about you, but I would kinda like to see that prioritized over the 400th version of Goku meeting Beerus. And while we're on that, third and final, Yamamura is not the character designer for the Galactic Patrolman arc, if that wasn't already evident by the new poster. Now, who it is, that's up for debate. Either Shintani or Kubota would be my guess, but regardless, Yamamura is not the face of future Dragon Ball. This is simply a brief return for a remaster of an old project he was heavily involved in. Will he work on Moro or whatever as an animation director? That's definitely possible, but that's still very different from being handed the position of character designer. And you will also probably see Takio Ide, Yuya Takahashi, Chikashi Kubota, Naohiro Shintani, and many others working as animation directors on those arcs. Now with that out of the way, let's put this trailer under a microscope, and let's start with the positives. So as completely surface level, misinformed and outdated as that why does modern animation feel plastic video I made in 2019, one thing I did mention and still hold to is regarding line work. I talked about how with cells, because you had someone tracing the lines with their own little hands, It gives this organic feeling to the lines. Now that was actually half the story. In GT they ditched that process and moved to tracing machines, which prints the animator's lines directly onto a cell. More detailed process on how that actually works on screen. No clue why it took until GT for it to change. They were already using this process for Sailor Moon and were using this type of tech as far back as the late 60s on their shows. Strange. Anyways, many other studios at this time also use this technology. So in a lot of older anime, the physical lines you see on screen can be that of a tracing machine. Regardless, you still had some level of an organic touch because you're directly transferring those hand-drawn lines done by the doga artist over. And even though Super's animation was also hand-drawn, being animated almost entirely on paper, exactly as Z, its creation went through the same process, from storyboard to layout to Genga to corrections and doga, but despite the actual animation process remaining unchanged, the way those lines were transferred over in the later stages of production by the finishing department was. With functions like Traceman found in Retouching Pro, would, as the name implies, trace a scanned in drawing, binarize it, and then you would smooth it out, which cleaned up the small, nuanced imperfections of the animator's original lines. Other studios like Production IG and Dean would use a different program, Animo, that didn't binarize the lines and actually allowed for a lot of that roughness to be kept in. But it never broke the grip that Retouching Pro had on the industry for a myriad of reasons that sit outside the topic of this video. However, with the Tournament of Power when Tatsuya Nagamine stepped in, and even more so for Broly, were treated differently, with this filter being added to allow that roughness in. And while toned down a dial, that continued on with Daima. And thankfully was kept for this project. There's now this nice thin to thick that just makes the line work feel more organic and less rigid. There's also a focus on more high contrast shadows, which in turn adds extra dimension to the drawings. Like, look how flat the original on the left looks in comparison. Huge improvement. And although the color palette is technically mostly unchanged, because of a lot of the adjustments made in the compositing stage, adjusting the temperature, adding gradients, glow and other various lighting effects, you do move away from the flatter color design Super originally had, T.Y. Tepehota. And well within the realm of lighting and effects, in a lot of shots now the colors actually better represent that of the main light source. Take the original here, you have a dark purple beam, but the colors are just muted. Not bad, but in the new version there's this purple tint to the clothing and skin, with this new vibrant outline. It simply integrates Goku better into the scene. He feels like he really is in front of something purple, and this one of Beerus. He originally was just painted in his standard palette, but again, in the new version, it feels much more like he's surrounded by purple ki. And that even goes for the background art, such as in this cut where the clouds have been further darkened. Again, to call back to another older video, for Daima episode 5, I was kind of talking about a similar thing with the Glorio fight. I compared and contrasted how this type of approach to the compositing was often absent from Super, and so I'm very happy to see this quality continue. It adds a lot more punch to the image. Also, in the realm of color, Beerus's attacks are consistently purple now. I completely forgot about those random yellow ones. A lot of the older CG effects have been updated. The new approach definitely beats having that CG fire effect inside a 2D animated one, and whatever was going on here. Now there are some shots that I feel are a bit too saturated and muddy. Ironic because in other cuts they desaturated the colors a heap, but by and large it is an improvement over the original in almost all cases. I really did forget how rough those CG aura and lighting effects were in early Super. The background art didn't fare too well either. These colors are a travesty. Oh man, 2015 was an actual dark age for Dragon Ball visuals. Now, PTSD aside, it's standard practice for the footage we see in trailers to be further adjusted before actually airing. You see it in modern shows all the time, and Dragon Ball is no different. so there probably will be some further alterations regarding the effects. Or maybe they'll tint everything green, who knows. Moving on to a few other areas like composition, that's another department that's been upgraded. Choosing a close-up over a medium one for Super Saiyan God's first appearance I think is more effective. This extreme long shot out of King Kai's planet makes the scale of that battle feel way larger than it ever was originally, and the lighting and darker colors do further help with that. And that's another thing, the colors for the background art, the darker blue or black sky, I think it's way more atmospheric and appropriate for those scenes. Anyways, this one though is the shining example of how small compositional adjustments can level up a scene. First part is through flipping it to a low angle shot instead of a straight on one. Second part, in the OG, it made Shenron feel small, look more like a big snake they summoned out of a pot than an actual dragon. And that's because the ship acts as a point of reference for us, the audience. And so when the ship takes up a huge amount of the canvas, more than the big dragon dude, both vertically and horizontally, it makes one element feel smaller, or at best, similar in scale to the other, which you don't want in this case. And so, how do you fix that? Well, the new version shows us how. Change up the amount of space they occupy on screen. The upper deck is drawn much smaller and pushed into the distance, and Shenron is scaled up and fattened up. You can also see further improvements in other areas I've already been bringing up, like effects. The small circle of light is upgraded to huge beams shooting out of the screen. Nice. Whoever drew this also made him a bit thicker, so that helps avoid the snake physique. And I guess it's as good as time as any to move onto that area. The drawing quality, which is also of no surprise, a lot better. Take this one, way more intense, both in the expressions and angle, looks very similar to Yamamura's older work in Z-Movie 12. This one is also a favorite. Now, controversial take out of the way first, maybe. I do actually like Takeo Ide's corrections for this one. He's always had a distinctive and expressive take to Dragon Ball, which is a tick in my book. I'm a big fan of animators who approach Dragon Ball's designs in a unique way, both new and old school, even if it isn't always polished. But can't deny the extra level of depth added through the shading by just being better placed, like around the brow, defining the volume to that facial muscle much more, feels very late cell Buark-esque, and adding an extra layer in places like under the chin. Also improved foreshortening with the bigger hand. It creates more depth between it and the head, a lot more wrinkle lines around the eyes and nose. It's the classic hook design. Super, as you can see in the original image, it usually just was like a few straight lines, not all the time, like many things in Super. It was inconsistent, but still common enough, so bonus expressive points there. And I feel like back in Super originally, with exception to guys like Shuichi Iseki, Naoki Tate, now Toshishida, outside them, it just wasn't really that common to see lines used around the face as much. It wasn't until the Shintani era with Broly, you saw that come back in a consistent way, which is great. I'm definitely not on the keep everything clean team. I love animators who will draw characters with intense creases around the brow and eyes that don't mind getting a bit sketchy. Katsumi Aoshima style, my goat. So I hope to see more of this. And the final point of praise takes me back to the line filter. It just makes those crease lines a lot more pronounced and bolder. You can see how the line weight in the original is all sort of the same. It's a little flat in comparison. Moving on, another example. There's a good mixture now of how the arms are positioned in relation to the height of the characters. In the original, if you draw a line through, all very similar, right? But in the new version, Trunks and Goten's hands are right down, imagine a V shape, and much higher up for the adults around them. Their bodies are also on an angle because of that, and as a result, it looks much more natural over the original. It's really great attention to detail. And there's heaps of other improvements here as well, with nice adjustments to the facial proportions. The nose sits closer to the mouth on Trunks, smaller pupils, better nose placement and shape. And you just see this again and again throughout this trailer. And we haven't even touched on the actual animation yet. This part by Ryo Onishi, you definitely can't miss him with those impact frames and debris, just like on Daima, and even with something as simple as animating an eye. He's on point. In the original, it's a lot of flickering white speed lines and camera shake, with a little bit of movement to the hair and one brow. The rest of the face though stays like fixed in place. Onishi shrinks the pupil down, then expands out, which brings more intensity to this moment. But notice how the whole face is animated. The crease lines under the eye, in between the brow, everything moves. The original feels so rigid in comparison. Then the Beerus cut, which is completely new, several layers of anticipation from when Beerus goes back, then comes down and back and in again, but also how he's like breathing in and out. It's very lifelike. I just love the touches of realism like that Onishi always adds to his work. And it's also a hard angle to animate from as well. But for him, I guess, it's just another day. Oh man, without going too much on a tangent, the way he animates movement is so realistic and loose. It's something that very few staff on Dragon Ball can match. And with exception to a few one-off guest animators, I would say that when it comes to the amount of depth that there is to his animation, he was one of the best on Dragon Ball, both past and present. Onishi isn't talked about nearly enough. Fight me on that. It sucks he didn't work on Super much though for its original run, but hey, better late than never. And if he's given big chunks of action like he was in Daima for the Galactic Patrolman arc, we will be eating high off the hog, or high on the hog. You get it, something hog related. Some other obvious animation fixes as well. Episode 5, a fan favorite. It was pretty simplistic. Beerus just slides side to side, plop plop. The second cut as he dodges, that's a little better I guess. For the new take though, it's a much closer angle, the motion is smoother, some camera rotations are added now, providing much more dynamism over the original scene. And speaking of dynamism, the new poses are all about that, so much better. As for the negatives, well, looking back I shouldn't have said, starting with the positives first, like I had some big list of gripes to unload after, because I really don't. Like, I kind of prefer the whited out eyes in the original scene and the shading style in this frame. I also noticed that in some shots they removed the facial highlights, but in others it's left like, no, you can take that away. And in some cases I feel they add a bit too much blur, but then in other scenes they take it away, and in others it's kind of fitting, so yeah. But there's just so much this team has fixed, it just dwarfs any nitpicks I have. I really did move from the bus of dread to the hopium train, regardless of the Yamamuro jump scare. Like, even now after breaking down this trailer and going side by side, it's made me genuinely excited to see what other fixes this team have made, and these new scenes that have been added, as well as the new opening and endings. And then there's the opportunity to partially rewrite some of the not so great stuff. And then after all that, there will be a remaster of the Chasm of Animation Despair, which was the Resurrection F arc, bursting in right after. That's going to be a tough mountain to climb, but seeing that flat, ugly color palette overhauled, actual appealing compositing, and having that battle animated with some proper intensity, with exception to that one amazing Tate bit. Oh man, thinking back to it, they're gonna have to reanimate the entirety of episode 24, because unlike 5, there is not one single good cut. Like, I still stand by that episode being way worse than episode 5. Although, keep the Fat Freezer cut on second thought, that is Hall of Fame worthy to me, next to Ebisawa's finest work. I want to see that with 20 layers of glow and blur added. But yeah, poor Kitano. I hate his style, but Toei also did him a disservice by dropping the big action episode of the arc right in his lap after he wrapped on what was pretty much a solo animated episode. He 100% would have been sleeping in Toei's office for a month or so. And that reminds me, just now actually, I was going to make a video about Kitano years ago called Dragon Ball's Worst Animator Got Better, because he generally did improve a lot since Super. I can't remember why that video never happened, but yeah, I can't believe I'm half keen to see the Resurrection F arc again as well. Maybe life is getting better. Darkest before the dawn, as they say. But yeah, with that, thank you for watching. Thank you to my patrons, and I'll see you later.